Hello and welcome to the first in a series of tutorial videos for FX Live. This is a quick start, so we're not going to go into a lot of detail, just give you a quick look at the application and teach you some of the basic concepts. One of the most important things to understand is that on each screen you have a little question mark icon at the bottom right, and if you press that it'll bring up an overlay showing you a brief description of what every button does on that screen. So I'm not going to go through all of those individually. You obviously can read that at your leisure, so certainly that's the first place to start when you're looking at how an individual feature works. The other thing I'd recommend you do is in the demo show that we ship with the product, I'd go into the perform screen and basically step through this and have a look at how this has been built. So if you just step through it using the big go button, you can sort of step through the cues, and as each cue executes you can see what's happening on the screen with the effects players, and also the notes associated with each cue give you a little bit of an idea about what that cue is doing and how it's been built. For example, this one has got an auto trigger on, so without me doing anything it's automatically executing the next cue and crossfading from the music into the heavy rain without me pressing any buttons. And at this point the next cue will reduce the level of that rain, and then the cue after that you can see it says it's going to crossfade to a busy street scene and then fire off a couple more effects after a delay. So we have a clock chime there, and if you've got MIDI installed it's also firing off a MIDI trigger. So that's certainly worth doing. That will give you a good flavour of the sort of things you can do, and you can always then go and look at how that show's built to see how that's been done. So hit all stop and let's quickly build a show from scratch just to get some of the basic principles across. Back to the home screen, create a new show, test, and into the design screen you'll see that's created as a new version with a single cue in that's currently silent. If you don't put a cue, if you don't add an event to a cue, it will automatically come up and say that's a silent cue. So what I'm going to do is start off with some walk-in music for the performance. So rather than plot those as individual cues, we have this new music tab where we can add incidental music to the show. So I've just added one of these and that's opened up my file dialog, and in the demo we ship you a number of sort of bits of music that you can use that are all copyright free. So I can sort of add a couple more of these in here, and you see whenever I click on something it automatically sort of starts to play it, so I can kind of get a feel for whether that's the piece I want. And also over on the left hand side you see I've got all sorts of controls for adjusting the level and trimming in and out points and things, which for music I tend not to need. Obviously you're going to want to add your own music. So these couple of ways you can get music or effects into the product. You can either import them from iTunes. It's important to realise that this will only show you music that's actually already on your device, so you have to make sure that you've already downloaded the music onto your device. It can't still be in the cloud, and then it gets imported into the show, and then I can find it in the list here and add it to the playlist. You can also get music and effects in by using the open in feature within the iPad. So you could have an email with a file attached, or you could use Dropbox, and if you just simply press on the file it will bring you up the open in dialog, and listed in the applications you can open will be FX Live, and you basically just select that and then it will open the application and import the file for you into the project, into the show. So I've got a few bits of music there, so I could start those by basically just hitting play, and then that will run that incidental music, and then I can hit fade out to fade that out. Or I could actually program that into the show, which is what I'm going to do. So I'm going to go back to the design screen and I'm going to add a music event to this first cue, which is the note symbol here. So that's automatically added incidental music in, and I can override the volume here and say I always want that to be quite low level. So when I execute this cue, it's going to play the incidental music. Right, so the next cue then needs to be the opening music to the show. So let's go for one of these. These are bits of music here. Let's have this one. So this is the music that's going to open our show. And importantly here, I need to set how I want this to transition out. So I'm going to set a 5-second audio fade on the out. I can either do this with the plus and minus buttons, or if I click on the number, it brings me up a little time entry box. So I can do things like go 7 dot, because I don't want to put the milliseconds in, so that's 7 seconds. So that's done that. And then the next cue is going to be some wind and rain, heavy rain and distant thunder, and I'm going to need that to be a little bit quieter, roughly like that. And what I forgot to do is to set the transition in time, so I want that to fade in over 5 seconds. And then also I want a clock to chime. So rather than do this as a separate cue, I'm going to add this as the same part of this same cue. So I'm going to add on here and click clock chime. But I only want it to chime 3 times. So I'm going to mark an out point there. And if I want to trim it exactly, I can use the little plus and minus buttons here. There's the start of the 4th chime. So that's my out point. And again, I'm going to set a 1 second fade. So to hear how those two effects sound together and get the levels, rather than press play down here at the bottom right, which would just play the single effect I'd got selected, I'm going to press play up at the top right where it says selected cue, and that will play the whole cue. So I can now hear how the clock chime and the rain are going to sound together. So I'm going to fade the clock chime down, because I want it to be quite low, so let's just hear that again. Okay, and we can hear the thunder fading in. So that's fine, but I don't want the clock chime to start straight away at the start of the cue. I want to offset that, so I'm going to add a start delay here of, say, 8 seconds from the start of the cue. So let's go and see if all that's worked. Back into the perform menu. I don't need to bother with the incidental music, so I'm just going to, well, I'll tell you what I will do just so you can hear the transition. So I'm going to hit Q1 go. So that's now playing the first track from the music playlist. And that will continue to play that playlist. They'll segue automatically one to the other without me doing anything. But once it's ready to start the performance, I'm going to hit go again, and that's now going to crossfade into the opening music. Now when I hit go the next time, we should crossfade to our rain and thunder, and our clock chime will also appear but with a delay, so you can see it counting down. So there we go, distant clock chime. So no storms are very dramatic without a few cracks of thunder, so just hit all stop there. Back to my design menu. I'm going to add a couple of thunder cues. Now I could add these as separate cues, but again it makes sense to give myself the flexibility of being able to manually trigger when they happen. So I'm going to add them as part of the same cue. So I'm going to add another audio effect, and I'm going to click up here and type thunder just to filter my list. So let's have that one. Okay, it's a nice dramatic one, and I'm going to adjust the pan of that to move it to the left hand side. And hit OK on that, and I'm going to add one more, pick that one, to pan that the other way, just for a bit of variety. So now I've got 4 audio events in that queue. But what I'm going to do with these two is if I'm going to click on the spot effect button down here on the bottom right, so I've made them both spot effects. What that means is that when I execute that cue, so if I just go back to here, take Q2 and then transition into Q3, you'll see that those 2 effects have appeared over on the spot effects buttons on the right hand side. So this means that I can hit them whenever I like. So that's the first one, that's the second one. And I can fire them off multiple times. I can even hit them both at the same time, and then fire a third one again, so I can make it as big and dramatic as I want to do. So that's a really good way of handling those kinds of live ad hoc effects that you often need within a show. So just before we leave this cue, I've got another issue in that the Rain and Thunder is going to finish now in sort of 20 seconds, and that's not long enough for the for this act. So I'm going to go back into that event, and I'm going to spin to the end here and mark an out point before the effect starts to fade. And then I'm also going to set an out transition of a few seconds here. And then importantly, I'm going to press the loop button. And so what that means is that effect is just going to carry on running now. It will just keep looping round, and it will do a nice slow crossfade on the loop, so you won't hear the loop point. So I now need to add something else to this, but as a separate cue. So let's imagine sort of 5 minutes into the scene, we need a police car to arrive. So I'm going to add a new cue, and I'm going to find a siren, which I think is down the end. Police siren, there we go. That's quite loud. Let's stop that there. So fade that down, and I don't want that to play for long, so I'm going to mark an out point, sort of say 7 seconds in, so somewhere there, and give that a fade out time of 2 seconds, and fade it in over 1 second. So that's now created a new cue, police siren cue. But when I go to that, that's going to fade out the rain, because one of the differences with FX Live 2 is that each cue is sort of self-contained, which is what most people want to have happen most of the time. So that's why we've made it like that. It's easier for people to understand. But in situations when you do want an effect to continue running, like we do here, we want Q3's rain to continue under Q4, then all we do is we basically, within Q4, we add the rain back in again. And the easiest way of doing this, to make sure you keep all the levels the same, is instead of picking it out of the effects list, you basically click on this current show button here, and that will give you a list of all of the things that are being used in the show currently. So we'll pick Heavy Rain and Distant Thunder, and that will automatically load in the settings, the loop points and the levels from the previous cue, so you know that Q4 is going to have everything you need exactly the same. And then finally I'm going to add one more silent cue, so I'm just going to hit cancel, and that will be the instruction to fade out everything that's running at the end of the scene. So let's run through those now. So start the rain with the delayed clock chime, throw on a thunderclap. There's my clock chime. So I could now just leave this running for minutes, and it will just continue to loop, the rain will continue to run, and then when it's time for the police car cue, just hit go again. The police car is added in, the rain and thunder carry on running, police car will fade out, and now I'm just left with my rain and thunder running as a looping effect, which will basically just keep going forever until I hit go to transition out to the silent cue that will fade that out again. So there you go, very quickly. That's a quick run through of all the kind of basic features, and then in future videos we'll sort of focus in on specific things in a bit more detail. So good luck. Don't forget to check out the Facebook page if you've got any questions, or look at some of the posts on there. We're adding an FAQ to the website as well, and if you get completely stuck, then feel free to drop us an email and we'll try and help you out. Thanks for your time.